On August 1st, 1999, Polly Letofsky left her home in Vail, Colorado and headed west. She traveled across 4 continents, 22 countries, and over 14,000 miles by foot, becoming the first woman to walk around the world. As an awareness campaign for breast cancer, survivors and supporters around the world came to walk with her. Everyday strangers welcomed her into their homes, offered food, accommodation, and friendship. The world had embraced her. The journey became much more than a fundraising event. It became a journey personifying the spirit of commitment and perseverance that will compel all of us to conquer life's biggest challenges, one step at a time. My great privilege to introduce Polly Letofsky.
Simple.
Why'd you do it?
Thank you. You're the winner. Why? Why on earth would you want to do such a thing? Isn't that what you asked? And it's something I have perused and analyzed over the miles and over the years, but it's hard to explain when something passion gets so deep inside your soul and you just can't let it go, and it's a vision that you see so clearly even though no one else does. How do you explain that? But what I can tell you is how the seed was initially planted. And that was back in the summer of 1974. I was 12 years old that summer, growing up in Minneapolis. And that was the year that I started to discover that there was this whole big world going on outside my backyard with my friends. And it was through the newspaper. And every day I would get up and scoop up that Minneapolis Star-Tribune and sit at the breakfast table feeling like a grown-up, reading about places I'd never heard of before. Being the summer of '74, I was reading about places called Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. Read about this place called Australia where their seasons are completely the opposite of ours. Don't, you're silly. How can anyone have Christmas in the summertime? That's ridiculous. But it got me really curious about how the world ticks. And then one day, in the newspaper, I see this big photo of a man walking down a highway with a big floppy hat on his head. And I lean in to read the caption, and it says, David Kunst, walking down Highway 6 in Colorado on his way home to Minnesota to become the first man to walk around the world. And I thought, wow, I didn't know you were allowed to think of such a thing if you were from Minnesota. Anyone from Minnesota? Come on, you know what's right. I know you do. So I remember looking at that photo and really thinking how powerful a single step is, whether that be physically or metaphorically. But I looked at that photo thinking all he had to do was put that little step in front of the other, and that served as his transportation around the world and across borders into these different cultures with different histories and languages and religions and peoples and ideas. And I thought, that's how I'm going to go see the world someday. I'm going to walk. But even then I knew that was thinking way outside the box for a 12-year-old girl from Minnesota in 1974. So I tucked that idea away in the back of my head and went on with my life. And fast forwarding ahead 20 plus years, life's journey had brought me to living up in Vail. And there was a year in my life when a number of women in my world were being diagnosed with breast cancer. And I'll make a long story short because I got 20 minutes. That's when I decided that I would do that walk that I'd always wanted to do, and I would do it for breast cancer. And it was August 1st, 1999. With 100 friends and family members that I started putting that one foot in front of the other and heading west. And after a mile, they all got a ride home. Melbourne, Australia, the southeast corner, and started working with the Breast Cancer Network Australia. It'd been now 7 months on the road. The first 7 months, as a matter of fact, were with crew support. Not that I had ever planned on having crew support, but they kept landing in my lap going, ooh, sounds like fun, I think I'll go with you. Enter Bob. Bob is my buggy. It's a baby buggy, and anyone who's had kids or grandkids in the last 10 years would know about a Bob baby stroller. They're sort of the jogger strollers. They took out the baby sling and created sort of a backpack on wheels. From Melbourne, Australia, the first night, second night, third night, the women of the Breast Cancer Network would come pluck me off the road and feed me and put me up in a warm bed. And then the fourth night, I was just too far outside Melbourne for anyone to help me anymore. And what that meant is for the first time in 7 months on the road, I was on my own. And that was the night that changed the course of this walk. What happened is I walked me and my buggy Bob into this rural town in southern Australia. And it was dusk, no place to stay, and I thought, well, it's time to buck up. I've had a pretty good go of it so far, so I gotta get tough. So I think I'll just camp out in the town park. This is a great idea. So I was looking around for a town park. when this woman came up behind me and said, "Can I help you find something?" And I said, "I'm looking for the town park." At which point she heard my funny accent. She said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And I explained who I was and what I was doing, and she said, "Well, fancy that." She said, "Let me introduce myself. My name is Margaret, and I'm the president of the local Lions Club." "Oh, the Lions Clubs have got to get involved with this. Why don't you come home with me tonight?" So Margaret took me home, and when I was all getting cozy in my hot shower I thought would be so elusive, Margaret called all of her Lions Club buddies. "Meet us at the pub, meet us at the pub." Because everything in the rural Australian towns happens at the pub, so the place is packed. And Margaret stands up on a stool, and she announces who I am, and let's show her a little Australian spirit, and she plucks the hat right off a guy's head, starts passing this hat around. And I'm watching in awe as this hat is floating around the pub. 5 minutes, the bartender counts it out and announces to the cheering crowd that we've raised $332 for the Breast Cancer Network Australia. This is a fantastic success. Margaret then calls the next Lions Club up the road. "This is Polly, this is what she's doing, can you help her out?" And they sent me up, and they greeted me and said, "Let's go to the pub." And I said, "Well, okay." And off we go to the pub. Then they pass a hat around. They call the next Lions Club. They call the next Lions Club. And now I'm doing a 2,000-mile pub crawl up the east coast of Australia. I carried on through Singapore and across the causeway into Malaysia. And that's where the real foreign leg of this journey began. As it turns out, Lions Clubs, and again now Rotary Clubs as well, are enormous there and so highly regarded. There was not a single step that I took through my 2-month journey where they weren't with. Time I reached halfway through the country, which is their capital of Kuala Lumpur. One of the members of parliament in the Malaysian government came out to greet me with 100 of her colleagues and officially declared the start of a breast cancer awareness campaign in her country, and she did. 2 days later, the events of 9/11 slammed us all into a crossroads in world history. And immediately the U.S. State Department issued a warning to all U.S. nationals overseas to keep a low profile. And the press conferences had to stop. And the educational forums had to stop. And overnight, I became keenly aware that I was no longer just a woman walking for women. Clearly now, I was an American woman with a Jewish name walking through a Muslim country during Holy Jihad, talking about breasts. So that's where I was. The closer I was getting to India, people kept telling me, "India's going to be tough. You better buck up." And I'm like, "Tough? I'm tough. I've now been on the road for 2.5 years, the last 6 months of which have been during 9/11 and immediately after. I'm tough. But now the Indian people are telling me, India, be very, very tough." And I said, "Oh, well, maybe I should start listening." Nothing can prepare you for crossing India alone by foot as a woman. These towns with riots, and I'm like, well, somebody better stop me. Lions Clubs or police would stop me and pull me into some unidentified building until the curfew was lifted and I could carry on, and it happened 3 times. But it was really clear that I needed some help. That's it. I need to rent a man. Yeah, this is a great idea. But where are you going to rent a man? In the middle of the central tribal regions of India. And apparently, like you find anything today, you Google. So I found an internet cafe, and I Googled rent a man /India. Found this guy named Shankar, who came up from South India. "Oh, you know your Westerners very, very much." And I was like, "Send Shankar up." And Shankar came up and he drove right behind me at 3 miles per hour. And people then did not harass me and hassle me and surround me and chase me. I did find out later, he says, "Oh no, they are hassling me." So I guess people were coming up to him going, "Why is your madam so angry with you?" The initial plan had been to go through Pakistan and Iran. The wars had broken out, they closed the borders, and I did have to fly over that region. So I'm sure my parents are the only 2 people on the planet thinking, "Oh, thank God we went to war." So I flew to Turkey and I carried on, and my spirits started soaring again. And then I carried on up through Europe, through Greece and Italy and Austria, Germany, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, a little bit of the Netherlands and France and Belgium. But the Europe that I had looked forward to for 3 years of planning, 3 years of walking, and a very difficult year crossing Asia blindsided me. I'd expected it to be the grand miles of my 5-year journey, and it was decidedly not. So I spent 5 months from the Greek islands up to Belgium, free camping, essentially. Meaning, the light was coming down, and I had 15 minutes to find a place to stay and set my tent up before it was pitch dark, and I would be safe inside my tent. And I stayed in cornfields, and riverbeds, and farms, and forests, and city parks with big floppy trees. Got up and made a beeline for England as fast as I could, and the day that I arrived into Dover, England was one of the great days of my life. I gotta tell you, I walked on that boat, and the Lions clubs were waiting there at the bottom, and they said, "Let's go to the pub!" Swept me up again. Rotary again as well. Swept me up again. Breast cancer work started up again. The press started up again. And it rained every single day through England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland. Boy, I gotta tell you, I didn't give two hoots, because people were nice to me again. And the British, so considerately, staggered their pubs for me every 7 miles. And I wanted to go home. But I was really afraid to go home, too. What if all these things that people have been saying about my people, my country, since 9/11 were true? I hadn't been home in a long time. But when I arrived into New York City, and I turned into Times Square, and I saw the lights of 42nd Street, and the flags waving from every conceivable flagpole, I just fell in love. And that 1,000-pound gorilla that had been on my shoulders since 9/11 just fell off right there in Times Square, and that twitch I had in my eye went away essentially overnight. As I started heading across this country, 1 foot at a time, heading west. 4 years now of discovering all these other countries and their history, their heritage, I was finally now discovering my own. And I crossed over the border into Minnesota, where that Minneapolis Star Tribune greeted me with a front page cover story. And there I was walking down a road with a big floppy hat on my head. And I walked down the Mississippi River Road to Missouri, where I turned right across Missouri and Kansas. And I came through Colorado, and I walked past the Loveland This Way sign, but I walked up Highway 36, up over Estes Park, and it was July 30th, 2004, that I walked back into Vail, bringing this global walk to a full circle at 14,124 miles. 4 continents, 22 countries, and raising over $250,000 for 13 breast cancer organizations in 8 currencies around the world. Take that daunting journey and you break it down into very manageable steps. You too can take on the world. Thank you for having me.
We want to thank you for being here for us today. What an incredible story of passion and courage. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Loveland, I have a small token of our appreciation, as well as the latest and greatest version of the Rotarian magazine.